The desert wind sang a low mournful tune across the mesas that morning, carrying dust and whispers from the canyon floor. The Apache scout called Caton crouched on a sandstone ridge, eyes narrowed against the sunrise glare. He had followed the trail of a raiding party for 2 days, hoofprints and blood spots leading deep into the borderlands where the mountains bled into Mexico. He expected to find death, maybe bones picked clean by coyotes. He didn't expect to hear a woman's voice. It came faintly at first, carried on the dry air. "Please, break the rope." Caton stilled, every instinct flaring. The voice trembled, weak, half-broken. Below him, near the bend of the arroyo, a figure hung from a rough post, wrists bound above her head, feet barely touching the sand. She was pale against the red earth, her torn dress fluttering like a wounded bird. The raiders had left her there to die under the sun. He moved like smoke, silent and swift, down the slope. When he reached her, her lips were cracked, her hair clung to her face, and her eyes, blue like mountain ice, fluttered open as his shadow crossed her. "You came," she whispered, as if she'd been waiting. Caton drew his knife and sliced through the rope. The woman collapsed forward, and he caught her against his chest. Her body was fever-hot, trembling. She tried to speak again, but her breath gave out. He lifted her easily, scanning the horizon for danger. The wind carried only silence now. He found a shaded hollow between rocks and laid her down. From his pouch, he poured a few drops of water onto her lips. She drank greedily, then coughed, tears streaking down her dusty cheeks. "Who did this?" he asked softly. "Men in gray coats," she rasped. "Said I was, a message, for the Apache who wouldn't kneel." Caton's jaw tightened. Soldiers. They had been hunting his people for months, calling them rebels for defending their land. But what message could a white woman be meant to deliver? She opened her eyes again, studying his face. "You're Apache." "Yes." "Then you should have left me." "Why?" "Because I came with them." The words hung heavy between them. Caton stared at her, confusion and anger warring in his chest. "You rode with the soldiers." "I had no choice. They took me from a wagon train near Fort Bowie. Said they'd spare my father if I guided them." She swallowed hard. "When I tried to stop them from shooting a child, they tied me here." Caton looked away toward the horizon, where the soldiers had vanished. Mercy was rare in this desert, but so was truth, and something in her voice rang true. "What's your name?" "Clara." He nodded once. "Rest, Clara. The sun will set soon. Then we move." As night crept over the canyon, Caton built a small fire shielded by stone. He watched her sleep, the flames painting her face in gold. He had seen many captives before, many who begged and cursed. But this one, she whispered to the stars as she dreamed, the same words he'd heard in the wind: "Break the rope." He wondered if she meant the rope that bound her hands, or something far older, far deeper. When she woke, she found a strip of cloth over her blistered wrists and a canteen beside her. Caton sat nearby, sharpening his knife. "You stayed," she said softly. "I gave my word to the spirits," he replied. "They led me to you. That means your path and mine cross for a reason." Clara managed a faint smile. "Do your spirits often lead you to trouble?" "Only when I ignore them." She laughed, and the sound surprised them both. It was the first living thing in that dead canyon besides the wind. For the next 2 days they traveled north toward the high mesas. Clara grew stronger, though her feet bled from walking. Caton taught her to wrap them in yucca fiber, to drink from cactus pulp, to move silently when hawks circled overhead. Once, she asked him, "Why risk your life for me?" He answered without looking at her. "Because once, a woman of your people saved my sister. She said every soul deserves one chance to begin again. I never paid that debt." Clara walked in silence after that, her eyes glistening in the firelight. On the third evening, thunder rolled over the desert. A storm was coming. They found shelter in a shallow cave. Rain began to fall in silver sheets, drumming against the stone. Clara shivered. Caton draped his blanket over her shoulders. "You'll freeze," she said. I have the fire. You'll have nothing left if you keep giving it away. Caton met her gaze, and something unspoken passed between them, a warmth neither could deny. The fire crackled, throwing shadows that danced like ghosts. She whispered, Caton, what did you mean, when you said our paths crossed for a reason? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Maybe the spirits wanted me to see that not all white hearts carry hate. And maybe, she said, they wanted me to see that not all Apache carry knives. He smiled faintly. Most of us do. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash their hands touched, a brief spark, but enough to change the rhythm of the storm. By dawn, the soldiers were near. Caton saw the dust trail before she heard the hoofbeats. He woke Clara and handed her his small dagger. If they catch you, they'll use you to find me. You must not let them. I won't, she said. But you can't fight them alone. I've fought them all my life. Then let me fight beside you. He studied her, this woman who only days ago had begged for her life, now standing beside him with fire in her eyes. Something inside him shifted. The first riders appeared through the haze. Caton loosed an arrow that found its mark. The echo of the gunfire rolled like thunder again. Clara ducked behind a rock, returning a shot from the fallen soldier's rifle. The skirmish was quick, fierce. Caton moved like a shadow. Clara's aim grew steady. When the dust cleared, only silence remained, and the smell of gunpowder mingled with rain. She looked at him, trembling. You saved me again. He shook his head. No, this time, we saved each other. As the sun broke through the clouds, painting the wet earth in light, Caton turned to her. You can go north. There's a settlement 2 days away. You'll be safe. And you, my place is here. You think I can just leave after everything? You must. Tears filled her eyes. Caton, I don't even know who I am anymore. I can't go back to them. Not after this. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then find a new beginning. That is what you asked for when you said, break the rope. Maybe you meant the ropes that tie you to your past. Clara took his hand. And what if I meant the rope that ties me to you? He froze, heart pounding in a way no battle had ever done. But before he could answer, a hawk cried overhead, circling once before vanishing into the blue. Caton watched it go. Then the spirits are laughing at me, he said quietly. She smiled through her tears. Maybe they're just telling you the same thing they told me. What's that? That some ropes aren't meant to be broken. The mountains rose like ancient guardians against the crimson sky, their peaks catching the last fire of the dying sun. The storm had passed, but its memory still haunted the air, the scent of wet earth, the echo of thunder, and the quiet between two souls who knew something had changed forever. Caton stood on the ridge, scanning the horizon. Clara sat behind him, silent, her dress tattered and her hands folded in her lap. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the words neither dared to speak. Finally, she said, you were right. There's a settlement that way, isn't there? He nodded. And you were going to leave without saying goodbye. He turned to her, eyes dark as obsidian. If I said goodbye, I wouldn't be able to walk away. She rose, the wind whipping her hair across her face. Then don't. Caton took a step back. You don't belong here, Clara. The soldiers will keep hunting. The settlers won't take kindly to an Apache beside you. The world isn't kind to those who break its rules. She stepped closer. Then let the world be damned. Her voice trembled, but there was fire in it, the kind of fire that burned deeper than fear. Caton stared at her for a long moment, torn between instinct and something older than either of them. You think you can live like this? Hunted, hated, never sleeping without one hand on a weapon. I've already lived through hell, she said quietly, and you were the only piece of heaven I ever found there. Caton felt his breath catch. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind died, the desert held its breath. He turned away, forcing himself to speak. We move before dawn. If you still mean those words by then, I'll listen. The night was long. Clara lay awake, listening to the crackle of the fire and the slow rhythm of Caton's breathing. She thought about her father, the man she'd never see again, and the soldiers who had tried to use her as a weapon. The world she came from was gone. The only thing that felt real now was the man who had cut her down from that rope. Sometime before dawn, she rose and walked to where he sat, sharpening his blade beneath the starlight. "I've decided," she said softly. He didn't look up. "You had the night to change your mind." "I didn't." She crouched beside him, eyes glimmering. "You saved me, Caton. But it wasn't just my life you saved. It was everything I thought I knew. You showed me that mercy isn't weakness. That strength can be gentle. And now, I don't want to live another life that doesn't have you in it." Caton finally looked up. The stars reflected in her eyes like silver fire. "If you come with me, there's no going back. Then forward is enough." They rode together into the mountains. Days passed, through pine forests where mist clung to the ground, across cold rivers that mirrored the sky. In every sunrise, Caton saw a little more of her spirit returning. She laughed again, sang softly as they rode, and learned the words he taught her in his tongue. But the peace couldn't last. One morning, as they crossed a narrow valley, Caton froze. Smoke, a column rising far in the east, black and thick. He recognized it instantly. "Cavalry," he said. "They've found our trail." Clara's heart clenched. "What will you do?" "What I must." "No, what we must." Caton met her gaze. There was no fear there now, only resolve. He nodded once. "Then we make our stand where the mountain narrows. If we fall together." By dusk, they reached a canyon pass, steep walls on both sides, a narrow path through. Caton set traps, scattered the horses, and prepared his bow. Clara loaded the rifle. The sound of hooves came like thunder rolling through the valley. Caton drew his first arrow and whispered, "For my people." Clara raised her gun. "For our freedom." The battle that followed was fierce and desperate. Bullets tore the air, arrows sang through the dusk. Smoke burned the throat. Caton fought like the spirit of the storm, silent, deadly, unyielding. Clara stayed at his side, firing until her hands bled. But there were too many. A shot rang out. Caton fell to one knee, a dark bloom spreading across his shoulder. Clara screamed, dragging him behind her. "Boulder, Caton, stay with me." He grimaced, clutching his wound. "There's no time. You have to run. I won't leave you." He looked at her then, truly looked, and she saw the fire still burning in his eyes. "You broke the rope, Clara. You're free. Don't waste it." Tears streamed down her face. "You think I'll be free if you die here?" Another shot shattered the rock beside them. Caton turned, eyes narrowing. He drew one final arrow, blood running down his arm, and whispered a prayer. The arrow flew true, striking the officer leading the charge. The rest of the soldiers hesitated. Caton seized the moment, pulling Clara up. Now, into the river. They ran. Bullets whined past. The river roared ahead, wild with rain. Without hesitation, Caton pushed her in and followed. The current took them, dragging them through icy water and foam. When Clara finally crawled onto the far bank, gasping, she turned, but Caton was nowhere. "Caton," she screamed. Silence answered, only the roar of the river. She stumbled along the shore, calling his name until her voice broke. Her heart pounded with terror, grief, and love all tangled together. The sky wept rain again as she fell to her knees. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "Please." Then, through the rain and mist, a shadow rose from the water, Caton, battered, bloodied, but alive. He fell to his knees beside her, and she threw her arms around him, sobbing. "I thought I lost you." He smiled weakly. "You can't lose what's part of your soul." Weeks later, they built a small home deep in the mountains, a place where the river sang through the trees and the world seemed far away. Caton's wound healed slowly. Clara learned to hunt, to speak his language, to live by the firelight. Some nights, when the wind howled through the pines, she would whisper again the words that had begun everything. "Break the rope." And he would answer, pulling her close, it's already broken. They lived quietly, between two worlds that would never understand them, but their love became the bridge between them. Travelers spoke later of a white woman and an Apache man who guarded a hidden valley together, protecting all who sought refuge there. Clara never told them her story, but every dawn, as the sun rose, she looked at the man beside her and knew that some ropes were never meant to bind, they were meant to lead two souls to the same place. Epilogue. Years later, when the soldiers had long forgotten the names, and peace had returned to the borderlands, Clara would teach their children the old words of the desert, about honor, about mercy, and about the day a warrior found a woman he could never forget. And when the fire crackled low, she would smile and say, if you ever see a rope binding someone who still has hope in their eyes, break it. Then, looking into the flames, she'd whisper, thank you, Caton. If this story touched your heart, remember, more tales of courage and love wait for you here. Subscribe now, and join us again for the next story under the desert stars.